Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this week's version of the Coaches Roundtable. Really glad you're joining us today for our first ever book review, where we're going to be talking about a great and amazing book today. But before we dive into that, we're glad to have all of you here. Please drop a chat down and let us know where you're listening from. And if you're listening on the replay, be sure to hashtag replay to let us know you heard the replay. And please feel free to interact with us during this. We are monitoring the chat. We'll do our best to answer your questions and get to you as quickly as we possibly can. And with that, I'm Sid Meadows, and I'm a business strategist and coach, and I help small businesses develop their growth strategies. And I'm really excited to be joined by these amazing coaches today. Jonathan, take it away, introduce yourself, and pass it around, please, sir.
Absolutely. My name's Jonathan Howard. I'm the owner of Success on Social. I help coaches create content so they can reach their ideal clients and be their authentic selves. So I will pass it over to Russell.
Thank you, Jonathan. Russell Eubanks here. Started my company Security Ever After 3 years ago, where I help cybersecurity leaders get promoted. Lubna, over to you.
Hi, and my name is Lubna. I'm a mindset and performance coach, and I help you slash any limiting beliefs, achieve meaningful goals, and soar in confidence and motivation. I'm looking forward to this conversation today. Back to you, Sid.
So I'm curious. I don't know that before we dive into it, how many weeks have we been doing this? What week are we on? Does anybody remember?
Why are you asking questions?
I just was curious. I just was curious because we've been doing this for so long. It just feels great. Go ahead, Jonathan.
What is it? 7 weeks of the live, I think.
I do think it's 7 weeks of the live stream. I think this is 7 weeks, and we did the audio version before, but all of us are avid readers, and I'm really glad that we're doing a book review today, or a book discussion. We're not really reviewing it. We're discussing a book by Will Guidara. It's called Unreasonable Hospitality. Here it is right here. And, Will, I don't remember exactly what year he wrote this book, but at the time he wrote the book, he was a co-owner of 11 Madison Park, which is one of the most famous restaurants in the world. It's a top 50 restaurant in the world. I think it actually made it all the way to number 1. And the book talks a lot about creating a culture. And though the book is focused on the restaurant industry, I personally believe that the book is applicable to any business. And so let's jump in first and talk about what you thought the theme of the book was. I've kind of identified 4 or 5 things that I think were the themes or the principles, if you will, that were discussed in the book. So, Jonathan, what do you think is one of the principles that stands out to you about the book?
It comes back to me like one of the things that my father said when I first went into retail, under promise, over deliver. Make sure you create an experience for every single person that you come across. And it's not just, those people that are, deserving of a special experience. It's everybody is deserving of a special experience, and deliver it whenever you can. That was the biggest thing for me, I think.
Under promise and over deliver. I absolutely love that because it's so powerful. Lubna, what about you? What stood out as a kind of a principle for you in the book?
For me, a restaurant is a restaurant. I mean, I know that we're talking about a restaurant that ended up in the top 50 and eventually in 2010 became number 1 on that list. But if we were to look at it from a zoomed out perspective, we're talking about a place where you can get food and different food. So there's not a lot that you can distinguish on unless you choose a specific kitchen or a specific way that you plate the food. So what I loved about the book, and also some of the stories, and he mentioned it in his TED Talk also, is that they said all of those restaurants in the top 50, what they tried to do, or at least what he tried to do when he was co-owner of the restaurant, was, well, we've tried to model the food and distinguish ourselves in the food, but if we really want to be number 1 on that list, we got to innovate something different. We got to be disruptive in the industry, because as much as you can perfect the food, get the best chefs, it's about something different. And I love where he shared that a hot dog was the reason why he thought about hospitality, because for him, the principle is every human being wants to be seen and heard. And if you look at it through that lens, then being able to do anything to design that experience and have people live that experience is something that no one can take away from you.
So the hot dog story was one of my favorite stories in the entire book. And I actually heard him tell the story on the podcast episode with Simon Sinek. And then I read it in the book and I was like, oh my gosh, it's so, so powerful. And in the book, he quotes Maya Angelou. Who knows the quote exactly? I don't know the quote exactly. Anybody know a
Well,
quote
which
exactly?
one? She's got several.
It's the one about people will never remember
Yeah.
what they ate.
People
Go
won't
ahead.
remember what you say. People won't remember what you did, but people will remember how you made them feel.
And that phrase right there, I think, is so important as we think about businesses. And we think about whether you're an individual entrepreneur, a coach, a consultant, or if you're in a small company or a multi-million dollar company, it's really important to acknowledge the fact people remember how you make them feel. And I look at this at all aspects of their journey of engagement with your organization, whether that's working with a customer service person on the phone or via email or your website or working with one of your salespeople or the guy doing the last mile delivery of the product, right? That people remember how they felt during that process. So I think it's a great highlight in the book. Now, Russell, what stood out to you as a principle in the book that you really resonated with?
It's interesting. You look at hospitality and you think of, people that do that type of work. It's like, okay, I remember this. I felt good here, I felt good there. And for a while, I was thinking, okay, this is really nice for people that work in hospitality. Then I thought, well, wait a second. You don't have to work in hospitality to do these and exhibit these behaviors, where it's a hot dog or going out of your way, or the words you said there, said of going that last mile. It reminds me, of the culture. What's it like to experience someone, no matter what industry that they're in? And it really clicked for me. One of the things, I do cybersecurity. I know it's not for everybody, but in cybersecurity, there's a statement that a lot of people have said, hey, security is your job. People say that, like to marketing people and to salespeople and to customer service people. It's kind of a common statement. But oftentimes when you say security is everyone's job, no one really has that clarity of, oh, wait, it's my job. I have a role to play. And I think it reminded me so much of a instance where oftentimes in how we communicate, how we set expectations, to not just say it's everyone's job, but to look at you and say, Sid, it's your job, and Jonathan, it's your job, and Lubna, it's your job. By assigning us that responsibility, no matter what industry, really hit home for me in a specific way, like I just shared there.
I think that's perfect addition to that. So, Lubna, I want to come back to you for a second. You talked about the memorable experience, and that's one of the takeaways that I have is that, and he talks about hospitality is about creating a memorable experience. And he believes that the most successful businesses are those that are able to create memorable experiences for their customers. And this means going above and beyond and doing things that are unexpected and special. So would you share the hot dog story real quick for the listeners that can understand and won't have to actually read the whole book or listen to the podcast? We share the hot dog story?
Yeah, no, most definitely. So Will describes this story as he was cleaning off tables in the restaurant. He was helping the servers. It was a really busy day. And as he was doing it, he listened to a table of 4 of people who were on a culinary vacation. And they were talking about that they had been to some of the top restaurants now that they finished with the restaurants they were sitting in, and had beautiful memories, etc. But what they didn't get to do was experience a hot dog.
Well, hang on. I'm going to interrupt you for a second. The phrase is the dirty dog. So if you're a New Yorker, it's a dirty dog, which is a street hot dog. So keep going. Sorry. I want to make sure we get it right. The dirty dog.
I know. I read that and I'm like, I can't say that.
That's okay. I did it for you.
And so he heard that and he thought, I'm going to go get a dog. So he went, raced into the kitchen with his plates, put everything in the kitchen, ran back out to the very first hot dog cart that he found, bought a hot dog, brought it back in, went into the kitchen. And then he thought, how am I going to get the chef to present this in our style? Because he's going to tell me that I'm absolutely crazy that I even brought it into the kitchen. So long story short, he eventually convinced the chef to do it. And he divided the hot dog in 4 different pieces and plated it up like he would do any. And before they got to the next dish that they had ordered, he brought them their hot dog, and as he put that plate on the table, said something like, "Now you won't have any regrets on this trip." And they went completely mad. They were like, "Oh my God, you got us this!" And you can all imagine something like that happening. And they literally said that they appreciated it very much, and it would be a story. It would absolutely the highlight of their experience, that hot dog, and that they would spend the rest of their life telling the story to other people, which, let's be honest, each and every single one of us would love that, to have an experience in such a way that it becomes a story you share with anyone and everywhere.
Absolutely. And it's, what does that story do? It spreads the experience, but more importantly, it spreads the brand of the restaurant. And it makes you want to go to that restaurant and talk about an amazing form of word of mouth advertising, if you will. They tell that story, that person they told it to tells it to somebody else, and then somebody else says, "Well, I'm going to New York next week. Let me see if I can get a get a reservation at this restaurant." It's an amazing form of advertising that costs you nothing, but focusing on the experience that a customer had inside your business, right? And again, this applies to any business, whether you're an individual person, a coach, or a consultant, or a multi-million-dollar organization. So I have a couple more. Jonathan, I want to go to you on this one. Hospitality requires vulnerability. And he talks a lot about vulnerability in the book itself. And he talks about, to create genuine connections with others, he argues that you must be willing to be vulnerable and open. And this means showing vulnerability and being willing to admit your mistakes and ask for help.
Yeah. And first of all, it did cost him something. It was a $9 hot dog, I'm sure, because that's what they go for.
$9 advertising. Great point.
Oh, man.
But when it comes down to it, yes, hospitality, being human requires vulnerability. Being a human in business requires vulnerability. You have to be real. And it's one of the things that will also help you get so much further than you would ever think. If you admit that you struggled on something, if you admit that you had a moment where things didn't go according to plan, if you admit you had a failure in anything that you do, that's going to be what people remember. It's going to be what people connect with, because it makes you human. We don't connect with superheroes. Even our superheroes have flaws because they need to. We need something that's not perfect. That's how we connect. So when you're just your human self, you're not pretending to be anything else. You're not pretending to be perfect. It allows people in. It makes them feel comfortable. You're welcoming them into your life. And that's a really powerful thing for people. So I think, it's not just about serving others. It's about being with others. It's about being present with others and sharing experiences.
So when you're in a restaurant, and just use the restaurant as an example, and something goes horribly wrong, if they come out, say, "We're sorry, we made this mistake, we made this dish wrong, let us make it right," and they bring you something else, you forget potentially about the mistake that they made because they revealed their soul and said, "Hey, we messed this up," right? Or, "We cooked this wrong. I'm sorry about that." I'll give you a perfect example. We were in a restaurant not too long ago, and I ordered my steak a certain way. It came out and it was well done. And I cut it open and said to the waiter, "Does this look like, medium to you?" And he was like, "No, I'm sorry." And then the owner comes over and says, "No, I'm sorry, we cooked your steak wrong. Dessert's on me." We will never go back to that restaurant. He didn't fix the problem. He didn't really own up to the fact that their chef is new, or whoever cooked it is new and didn't know how to cook steak, or didn't know how to measure the temperature of steak or whatever. And so because of that experience, we will never go back. And I think as business owners, we need to remember that the experiences people have with us, however real or not real they are, impact their decision of whether or not they're going to purchase from us the next time, right? Or they're going to reach out and call us the next time they need something. So I think it's super important to be sure that we're being vulnerable. Lubna, you look like you got something at the tip of your tongue.
That time.
Yeah, no, I do, because it made me remember some. I know we're talking about restaurants, but um, I had an experience within a University of Applied Sciences where a student had been coached by one of the people there, and it got really heated, really heated. They were both exchanging words that cannot be repeated in any way, shape, or form. And I didn't know this, but the teacher, the coach, was very upset because we're like, I've just been called all sorts of names, and now I see what they have written down, and I'm doubting myself. It's literally what he said. Now, this is an older man. He's been teaching and educating for many years. He knows what he's talking about, but because of that experience, it really made him question whether or not he was really being very critical of this person. And I said, can you, and he asked me to do a second opinion. And I read about the very first half page and said, I don't have to read the rest. I totally agree with you. This is not up to the standards that we require to be able to give him his diploma. And I said, but let me talk to him. And I had a conversation with him. And at the end of that conversation, he said, this was a really good conversation. And I remember, because I had someone else with me as a witness, I'm like, this was really well. I was prepared for someone who was really going to go with all of the complaints. But because he had a positive experience, he actually gave positive feedback, and he's still doing the work to get it done. So I know that we're talking about restaurants, and I know that Will in his book shared about what he did to boost up that restaurant and end up with the #1 spot in the top 50 worldwide. But he's went on to say every business should have a hospitality mindset. And that means putting your clients and your employees at the heart of every decision. And I'm like, when I read that and thought, okay, I've written a whole book with stories of organizations who've made that transition. So it can be done in a variety of organizations, small and large, but it does require that commitment and that belief and faith into that one statement, which is, I'm putting my employees and my clients at the heart of every decision.
So this is a conversation that we have every week, right? There's no script to this conversation. We just talk randomly. And Lubna, I just want to thank you so much for passing the ball to me, because you're bringing up the next point that I wanted to go. Literally, like, you just like threw the softball right at me and said, here you go, Sid. So I'm serving it up to you because I want to go to Russell with this one, because Russell managed teams for a long time in his career. And one of the third takeaways I have from this book, because they're one of the principles, is hospitality starts with the team. A positive and welcoming culture in a business starts with the people who work there. He emphasizes in the book the importance of building a strong, supportive team that is committed to creating an exceptional experience for their customers. So, Russell, as somebody who managed a large team in the past, tell me what your thoughts are about it. And my follow-up question is, how do you get your team on the same path as you're on to ensure that you're creating those experiences for your customer?
I think a practice I learned in leading very, very large security teams is I had to recognize and spend time doing things that only I could do. So there was something, it was improving things, or whatever it might be, whatever those things were. If I didn't do them, they didn't get done at all. And some of this was to go and engage with other departments like marketing and sales and HR and finance, all the teams that are non-traditional partners with cybersecurity. But I knew that if I didn't go and spend time with them, if I only spent time in the departments and divisions I was privileged to lead, nobody from finance would give a flip about us. Nobody would care, and we wouldn't know what's important to them, literally the reason why the organization existed. So I've never worked at a place that only existed because of cyber. I've been at places that it was a risk to lots of different types of industries and business. So back to what are some things that only I could do? I wanted to go set that expectation. I wanted to go not delegate, hey, go find who's our CFO, go figure out who's our marketing person, but to go put time on my calendar and start to develop and curate relationships. And then perhaps it would be that I would delegate, assuming there was responsibility to someone else, as I went to go find someone, say, in charge of law enforcement to do that very same thing. So not just saying, hey, go and meet with somebody, hey, go spend some time, or buy somebody a cup of coffee and I hope it works out, but to actually model that, bring folks along with me on my team, and then eventually transition that so that I can go and do that same thing, repeat that process to help understand better why the company's here and how it's able to do that. So that modeling, that what's something that only I can do, and if I don't do it, it won't get done. And a lot of that leadership things just kind of fit in that model of serving and recognizing my role in an organization.
So I'm going to reframe the two things that I heard you say. The first one is build relationships outside of your department, right? Build relationships outside of your core function. And then you do, part of the reason why you do that is because we have to understand as an organization that employees are each other's customers,
100%.
right? We have to be sure that we're showing up for other employees and doing what they need us to do so that they can do their job, so that their job can be done for their customer, right? So I think it's not a full circle, and I really appreciate the way you explained it. But those are my two takeaways from that. And so, Lubna or Jonathan, anything to add to that as it relates to building a team with a heart of hospitality or a heart of service?
I've got one that really stuck out with me, and I think it's something that is really important, but many people miss, and that's to elevate the people around you. Give them the recognition for the part that they play in the organization. Mm-hmm. They are the reason you're successful. You're not the reason you're successful. You're not doing all the work. Remember to elevate the people around you. And I think it's something that can translate to all different, organizations, but also just in general. When you are around people that make you better, make sure you're elevating those people. So, like all of you make me better. And I appreciate that. But it's so important to recognize people that do that and recognize that in your organization.
That is
yeah,
so
and
good,
in addition to that one, sorry, Sid,
no, you did.
is one of the things that I loved about how Will said is that he created a lofty goal of setting the bar of I want to be number one on the top 50 list, but he also made sure that he spent time, energy, and attention on getting the buy-in from the team, because he realized I can want to be on number one, but they have to want it just like me, and I have to bring them along and make sure that they make that decision with me so that we can have a conversation about, okay, well, what will it require from each and every single one of us? What will our individual contribution be? I mean, I've seen so many leaders come up with lofty ideas, visionary, big, hairy, audacious goals, and then say, but this is what I'm going to be doing. And you just need to do this or this or that. And I'm like, but have you invited me to make that decision with you so that I can contribute the way that I uniquely can, instead of you wanting something, but you only want it the one way?
Mm-hmm. And again, you just tossed me the softball to the next thing that I actually wanted to talk about.
We're synchronized.
No, we really are. We really are. Because I think the fourth theme that I picked up in the book was about creating a culture of hospitality requires ongoing effort and attention. It's not something that just can be achieved once and then forgotten about. It requires constantly seeking out new ways to improve the experience for your customers and your team members. So to put it in a phrase, is hospitality is about continuous improvement. And he talks about this a lot in the book. And one of the things that stuck out to me was the experience that you got when you walked into the restaurant. Think about this as the experience on the website or experience as you walk into a business. They had no hostess stand. They removed the hostess stand. And the person knew as you were walking in the door exactly who you were. So they said to you, good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Eubanks. And that had you make this feeling because you didn't even give them your name. And they said, oh, your table is ready. And they walk you straight to your table. And the way that they went about doing that, all the way down to the cues and the little hand signals that they gave when a table was running low on water. So a server would come over and pour water in it, and all this back end communication that they were doing. Those were all results of constant, continuous improvements in their business. And each and every one of us individually, personally, and in our businesses have room for individual or have room for continuous improvement. So thoughts on that?
Yeah,
I'll hop in, and yeah, I mean, I think any business has room to innovate, disrupt the way things have always been done, and just make sure that they're being better. For me, one of the biggest signals of a positive experience in a restaurant is that my water glass is never empty. And I think when you look at it in that way, it's simple. My water glass is never empty.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard to do that. It's really hard to do that. You have to pay attention in so many different ways to everything that's happening at a table in order for that water glass to never be empty. And how can we make sure whatever that thing is that we use as our water glass, how can we make sure that we do that? And what's your water glass in your business?
Oh, that's a great question. Russell, go ahead.
Back in the day, like before I started my company, I would travel a lot. So Delta would send me an email, "Hey, how was our flight?" Or Marriott would send me an email, "Hey, how was your stay?" And I was used to that every single time I went, and I did a bunch of those. I would get that email. I would expect it, and sometimes I fill out, sometimes I didn't. Now it's every Friday night. We go out to our local pizza joint, and they get a pizza, and then an hour afterwards, I'm going to get an email in my inbox that say, "How did we do? Did we fill the glass of water like you wanted to? Was your pizza cooked right? Was your steak cooked right?" And just by not just saying it's a once a year thing or a once and done thing, but a continuous exposition to go and say, how well are we filling that water glass?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that just being intentional about that and doing it over and over and over again and being vulnerable enough to take that feedback and adjust and pivot and do things so that you can almost like reverse engineer an experience where someone says, yes, I love my pizza, I love my flight, I love where I stayed that night. Whatever the case may be, doing that on purpose is going to make a significant difference.
So when you think about continuous improvement, I think it's important to also empower the people around you to come in, and the employees that work with you, whether they're colleagues or somebody that works for you or somebody that you work for, to come to the table, not just with problems, but come with solutions. There is never a business out there that is perfect or will ever be perfect. You can strive for perfection, but nobody's ever perfect. And every business has its different versions of problems, right? But when there is a problem in the business, whether it's process related or product related or program related, I'm sure I could come up with 10 more. Don't just come with the problem. Come with the solution or come with an idea for the solution so that then the team, as we've talked about before, this cross-functional diverse team can come together and solve the problem together so that your customer has a better experience with you and your organization. And honestly, this is exactly what that book is about. This book is about, let's focus on restaurants. This book is about creating a dynamic customer experience. Lubna, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I as you were sharing that, I was thinking about the conversations that I've had to get to write them up in my book about all of these little things, and I was reminded of the very first interview that I had. It was an organization in Amsterdam here in the Netherlands, and we were picked up downstairs by a secretary who took us to the floor. We walked through the restaurant, and she put us in a conference room and then said, "What would you like to drink?" and went to get us our cappuccinos. And we were looking around at that conference room because there were posters. And we were standing at one of those posters. And as she came in with 2 cappuccinos, she went, "Oh!" and started to tell the story behind that poster. And we were like, "Can you please keep going?" She was so passionate, so
awesome.
enthusiastic. And there was a whole story behind a piece of paper, behind a little bit of a glass, what was a poster, in such a way that both of us at the end, after we left, said, we want to work here. If you, as the person, as the secretary who just got us from downstairs, helped us gets us to experience this, that we're so enthusiastic that we were actually said, can I work here? We
I
hadn't
love
had
that.
the interview yet with the senior executive. We were like, we want to hear, and I still remember to this day that one experience.
And
And
I
it
think
only
we,
got better because the interview was like over almost 2 hours, and the stories just kept going, and we were like, oh boy.
so I think you're highlighting something that I'm sure that everybody listening and us, I know that all these memories have flooded back to me about moments that I had really amazing experiences with a brand or with a business, whatever that it might be. And I think that's really what the crux of this is that create an experience that makes you and your organization memorable. And the last point, which I think really ties this all together, and the last principle that I found in the book was create in your organization, remember that hospitality is a mindset, and that hospitality is not just about proving good service or a pleasant experience for customers. It's about creating a culture that is centered around the needs and well-being of others. And each and everything comes down to our mindset. So I want to go around real quick because we are over time. Um, Jonathan, I'll start with you. We'll go to Russell, and then Lubna, as you wrap up, tell us about next week. Okay. So Jonathan, any final thoughts or any key takeaways from the book you want to share with the group before we leave today?
I'll quickly share. I 18 years of retail experience with Barnes and Noble. My office in in the flagship store that I ran, I had an entire wall that was painted with chalkboard paint, and it just said "What's next" on there. And every single employee was empowered to come in at any point during the day and write down something that they wanted to do next, something that they thought we could do better, something that they thought would be an interesting way to use our place at the university. And it created experiences not only for the employees but also for the people that would shop from us. And that, to me, that's what we want to do in our businesses. We want to know what's next. We want to create with our people, we want to create with our audience, and we want to make things special for people. I mean, I think that's just the whole idea.
Russell?
Yeah. I also think create an environment where when there's a new employee or someone new to the team, go out of your way to find the value of their fresh set of eyes, where they won't be biased to say, here's how we do things here. We've done it 45 years this way here. But have someone be able to invite them in and say, hey, what do you see? What would you change? What stands out to you? What did you think was going to be the case? And when you're here in our department, you find out it's completely different. So engineer experiences like that, especially when there's new people. Invite them, celebrate them, thank them, and as a way to get that feedback, sometimes in unexpected ways.
That's good. Lubna?
I would say I would end with the question that Will remembered his father told him, that started this entire journey that he went on, which was, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? You start asking that question about your business, about your endeavor, about your community, about your mission, about your movement. What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? And what comes up for you? It may be as simple as, I need to go get a hot dog from the hot dog cart, or something else, whatever it is. But go through life like that. And that concludes our session for today, doesn't it, Sid?
It does. I'm going to wrap us up in a second, but before I do that, Lubna, tell us what's coming up next week.
Next week, one of my favorite topics. I know we say this every week, but really we like to talk about things that we like to talk about. We're going to be talking about the power of having a mentor. Each one of us has had mentors. We have mentors. The power of having someone who's walked the path that you want to go on is extremely powerful. So we're going to be diving deeper into, how did we end up with the mentors that we've had or have, and what is the impact that they've had on us, and how are we mentoring others?
Oh, that's so good. I'm looking forward to that. And I just want to take a minute and say thank you to everybody for joining us today. This has been our first ever book discussion. We've been talking about Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Cadera. This is the book right here. If you're not into reading or you're not a reader, go listen to his TED Talk or listen to the podcast interview with Simon Sinek. And at the end of the day, I'll wrap us up with this is creating a great, amazing experience in your business and for your customers starts with you. You have the power to direct it all, and it starts with you. And so, to Jonathan's point, grab that chalkboard, write out your ideas, figure out what you can do, and let's move your business forward. So, thanks for being here thanks for being here today, everybody. And we will see you again next week as Lubna takes the mic away from my stumbling self today. So, have a great weekend, everyone. We'll see you later.
Bye for now.